So there's been some good news when it comes to Chrono Odyssey. Now, it's not the kind of news that's a massive revelation, but it is confirmation of things that we'd heard before, and that in a way, in this sense, is good news because it means the game is still on target to be released this year. So basically, there has been the Kakao financials. There's actually also been the NC Soft financials. I'm assuming there's some kind of legal requirement in Korea where they have to do this at a specific time. I'm not 100% sure about that though. And in the Kakao financials, they talk about a couple of different things and they reveal the release of their future products because they're trying to tell the investors what's happening with their company. The good news is simply that on the release date scheduled, Chrono Odyssey is still listed as being the end of 2025. And Arcade Chronicles, incidentally as well, is still listed as being the middle of 2026. Now you might be thinking, why is that good news? Well, it's good news because it means it might actually come out this year, but it's better news because it means that they have now gone through a couple of different financials where that has consistently been the plan, and they believe they are still on target for that as of right now. They did say that the closed beta test was going to be held, I think, like very soon, and they were committed to that happening in the either Q1 or I think H1. I can't remember exactly what they said. And if you don't know, the plan for Chrono Odyssey is basically they're going to do a closed beta test, then I think they're going to do an open beta test, and if everything goes well, the release will be in the end of 2025. But what's historically been happening, and it happened with Arcade Chronicles specifically, is that there have been delays creeping in and things are keep getting like pushed back and stuff like that. So weirdly, just having confirmation that nothing has changed to me is kind of good news. One thing that does suggest that it will actually come this year, but is a bit of a risk, is the fact that they being Kakao, have actually had a significant drop in their revenue and their profits. That means they are relying on games like Chrono Odyssey and Arcade Chronicles to pull them out of that and to get some profits back. That does mean they could rush the game to release. Now, that's good if you want a game, it's bad if you want a full polished finished game, because if they're rushing it, maybe it won't be as perfect as it should be. Because if you don't know, Chrono Odyssey is an action combat MMO being made by, well, it's actually being made by Chrono Studios, which is a subsidiary of NPixel, and it's being published by Kakao. It's an action combat MMO that's being released in 2025, so for me, this is kind of good news. I'm looking forward to the game, and if it actually does come this year, I think that will be I think it'll be one of the biggest MMOs of the year, if not the biggest. Now, there was a little bit of extra details when it comes to the business model. Now, they've said a few different things. It kind of sounds like what they're trying to do is have this kind of like growth mechanism in the game, which I think is more like a games of service kind of mentality where you're going to be like farming gear on repeat, which for a lot of grinders in an MMO, it kind of makes sense. You know, maybe that's actually what you want. But they also spoke about the business model. Now, in the past, they basically said it would be buy to play with some cosmetics, and they kind of reiterate the same thing here, but they did it in a little bit of a confusing way. So what they said is that we're not going to have pay to win. But then the next sentence, it depends on how you translate it, basically. So it kind of sounds like that the lady who's doing the live translation, she says that we're not going to have pay to win, but you will be able to enhance your experience in game, which basically sounds like pay to win, which obviously sounds a little bit like a contradiction. But having then looked at the actual transcript and then translated that using like AI or Google or something like that, you get it basically where they just talk about probably like cosmetics, which is what we expected and would suggest a limited amount of pay to win. It is, however, a Korean MMO being published by Kakao. It has all the hallmarks of potentially pay to win, so I'm not gonna say it's not gonna have any pay to win. I suspect it will have at least some, considering that it's going to be a PvE game. I think they'll use that as leverage to be like, well, it doesn't really matter if it's a little bit pay to win. And, you know, in some levels, I kind of agree with that. But for me, it's just a relief that, you know, this game is still on track. They're talking about not having a high amount of pay to win, which I think is going to be very good, especially for the Western audiences in particular. And while there's not a lot of information right now, I think once we get past that closed beta that they keep talking about, maybe we'll start seeing some signs of marketing. Maybe they'll take that feedback and, you know, if there's a lot of negative feedback, I guess in that test, they might have to delay it. But if there's a lot of positive feedback, they then might go to the public test. And that's when I think Chrono Odyssey will kind of like ramp up. At the minute, let's be honest, nobody's really talking about Chrono Odyssey. Not a game on that many people's radars right now. But I think once they're confident that the game is coming and they're confident what the game is going to actually have in terms of its gameplay, they will then reveal that too. all of us, and we'll all be delighted to hear it, maybe, or not. It depends on what kind of game it is, I guess. Either way, I know that this isn't like groundbreaking news here. I know it's not really that fancy. It's literally just saying, yes, it's still scheduled the end of this year. Yes, we're still not planning on having pay to win. And to be honest, we've heard that several times, except the fact, you know, these games are getting kind of delayed, especially Arcade Chronicles in particular. But as they often say, no news is good news. And in this case, I think and hope that it is good news. There has been another financials, which was by NCSoft, and I was talking about Aion 2. Aion 2, now, if I'm honest, is even more dubious than it was. I think Chrono Odyssey and Arcade Chronicles, yeah, looking good. Feeling they should be like decent games. Aion 2, though, there's two things that might not be that great. One of them we already knew about. The fact that the game is going to be a mobile and PC game, that could be a bad thing. However, it wasn't really that bad with Tarisland, so maybe Aion 2 will be an okay mobile game and a good PC game. We don't know about that. But what NCSoft said in their recent financials is that unfortunately it is going to release in 2025, but it's going to release in Korea and Taiwan first. And then they're going to use the knowledge from that launch to then make the game a success in the West. Now, we've seen that pattern before with NCSoft with Throne of Liberty. Now, obviously excluding Taiwan, but they released Throne of Liberty in Korea. And then I do think that the Western version of that game very much benefited from the Korean version existing. It meant that they had content. It meant that a lot of the broken things were fixed. It meant that the gameplay just made a lot more sense and they could adapt and actually make it better for the Western release. But what it does mean is that there probably won't be a simultaneous release. It will be released in Korea and Taiwan first, and then the West second, which for me, I generally don't like, but that did actually pay off, I think, with Throne of Liberty. So maybe it makes sense. Maybe they're actually going to look for a publisher again, possibly. I'm not sure about that. That's just speculation. Because I think they are publishing Throne of Liberty in either those zones. Obviously, they publish it in Korea, but either Taiwan or Japan or something where they themselves publish it, and then Amazon do the rest. Maybe they're looking for a similar deal. Although in the last financials, they said that they lost money because of the Amazon deal. So who knows? It's hard to say. That's obviously not been revealed. Aion 2, though, I'm like less hopeful for it, but it is one I'm just going to keep an eye on right now. And it turns out we're just going to talk about some other MMOs as well. It's also rumored, although this is actually from October, but I just want to talk about it here because, I don't know, we're just talking about MMOs in the future of the genre. But it's also rumored that Nintendo are actually going to be making an MMO. Obviously, that would now likely be the Switch 2, which is coming out soon. I think it might be coming out in April, actually, don't quote me on that. But they had this kind of like game that was effectively getting described as maybe a combination of like Palia and maybe something like Harvest Moon, Animal Crossing, where you're going to be building a town and all that kind of stuff. Might not sound that interesting if you're like a traditional MMO player, like, you know, you like World of Warcraft or something. But if you like your cute, cozy MMOs, Nintendo's going to do it, and they're probably going to do it well. The actual next big game that everybody's going to be talking about, though, is obviously going to be Dune Awakening. Now, the NDA isn't dropped on Dune Awakening, but a lot of people were allowed to actually give their first impressions. I was actually in that category. I have seen the footage. I've played the game. I'm allowed to give my thoughts and feedback. I didn't necessarily make a full video about Dune Awakening simply because I'm not really sure what I'm adding. I've only played it for a couple of hours, if I'm honest. It's not historically my type of game, which might apply to you, but I think it will actually have a huge audience. It's going to be a survival MMO, a lot of gathering, crafting, PvP in the deep desert if you want it, PvE elsewhere if you want that as well. Yeah, I think Dune Awakening is going to be massive. A release date for that at the minute isn't forthcoming, but they have reconfirmed that it's basically going to be the first half of 2025. They did, however, say that May is still early 2025, which I disagree with, by the way. I think early 2025 probably meant like, you know, February, March. I don't necessarily think it means May, June, but you know, if they want to, you know, get by with linguistics, then we'll let them have. I guess it's technically the first half, which is early 2025 as opposed to late. But either way, it looks like Dune. I would guess now, considering they mentioned that, probably May or June. The marketing, though, has ramped up. You're seeing more trailers. You saw the NDA kind of drop for the content creators like Force Gaming, etc. Yeah, we should expect to see that. So that's going to be a big one. I'm not really sure how much effort I'm going to put into that one, but I'm following it kind of casually at the moment. What I really want is an actual just true proper MMO. Maybe Riot Games will give us that. They are still working on that one because job postings have said that they are still working on that. So maybe that will happen. Maybe that won't. Probably not happening this year. Probably not happening next year. Kind of quiet on the MMO front. We got Dune. Then we're going to have Chrono, Arcade, and Aion 2 possibly thrown in there. Everything else, looking a little bit dire. Unless something like Light No Fire is actually an MMO and we just don't realise it. Either way, that's it. I just came on and spoke about a few different MMOs. Some good news, I think, with Chrono Odyssey. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Have a most beautiful day. Like and subscribe. Goodbye.